Well, I won't speak until 1 o'clock. I won't. And I couldn't possibly do justice to the debate by responding to each individual senator. I hope no one senator will not mind if I don't refer back to every single contribution. I just wanted to share a few thoughts. First, I'll start with what Senator Horkin says. I think he's absolutely right. You are absolutely right that we listen to everyone. Every place matters. Every person matters. We will only make the scale of the leap we need to make when we listen with respect, including those who don't agree, including those who vote against for whatever concerns and reasons they have, because they represent people who have concerns, and so to get as much consensus, as much political public support for this, we do it in a listening, respectful way, particularly for the agricultural sector. Senator Cummins and numerous others here, Senator Murphy and others, have raised concerns about the impact of this on the agricultural sector. A couple of thoughts. Well, firstly, it will impact the agriculture. The agriculture sector is as involved in this, and maybe even more so than every other sector, or as much so as every other sector. Firstly, it's affected by climate change like no other sector. But secondly, energy is going to completely transform, 100% change. Industry is going to be 50, 60, 70% change in the next decade. Transport the same. Agriculture will have to play its part. And for Irish agriculture, if it doesn't, it would be in deep trouble, because it would get the reputation internationally of not being green, and that would be killer. At a time when there's real challenges from the Mercosur deal, from the UK-Australian trade deal, where we've got cheaper products coming in which don't have the same environmental standards, our opportunity in agriculture is to stand up for environmental standards, and because it's such an exporting sector, if word goes out internationally that Irish agriculture is not playing its part, it's finished, in my mind. And therefore we will work together with the Irish farming community, forestry, land use community, to make sure this works for farmers, but also works for the environment. The two, we can work and will work together. I've listened to a number of different senators here today make the case, which I think is a very valid case, that we have to look at sinks as well as sources. We have to account for that. I believe the bill does, and I believe it consistently goes back to the international agreements that govern everything here, which also recognise that sinks as well as sources are important. And I believe central to our response is going to be the land use plan we're going to need, which looks at all these variables. First and foremost, about getting a whole new generation of young farmers involved and paying them properly. That's the first key metric for success or otherwise. But secondly, that yes, we do store carbon in how we farm and how we run our forests and how we manage wetlands and how we restore nature. And also that we restore biodiversity at the time. This has to be nature-based solutions to tackle climate change, because we have a biodiversity crisis as well as a climate crisis. And we also at that time stop the polluting of our waters that has occurred in the last 30, 40, 50 years, going from 500 pristine river systems down to 20. That has to be reversed, or else we can't go out there and claim that we're Origin Green. And we have to tackle the ammonia pollution and the nitrogen pollution and the phosphate pollution that is endemic in our country at this present time, and increase incomes as we do so for Irish farming. And I believe that can and will be done, including the likes of what Senator Murphy said about horticulture on our peatlands. I know there's huge controversy at the moment in terms of importing peat or not, but we have to stop the industrial extraction of peat. That's an absolute certainty. Legally, we have to do that. But that doesn't mean that we don't start using our bogs in the way you suggested, Senator Murphy. It's exactly the sort of opportunities that Bornemone is starting to see, and that will create jobs and will create opportunities in the Midlands particularly. Second, in transport, and again, numerous senators mentioned, I won't even go down to the names in terms of who addressed this transport issue. But can I make a couple of points? At the same time we passed this bill, We then have to do a National Development Plan review, and the two go together. We have to start aligning our capital investment, particularly with our climate plans. And that, as I see it, the key changes, well, firstly, in terms of roads, I think we'll be switching to large numbers of bypasses because that actually helps us in the climate front. Because the more bypasses we have of towns, the more those towns can revive, we bring life back into the centre. Having people living in the centre of the town, it's not only good in terms of addressing the housing crisis, but it means we don't have to build out, and we don't have to pour all the cement for the new pavements and the new water management systems and the new schools and the new everything that goes out and out and out. Meanwhile, while the centre of our towns, including Dublin town, is dying. That doesn't make sense. The climate clever way is to bring life back to the centre, use the and you can walk to school, walk to church, walk to the pub, walk to the shops, and use the existing buildings. We've stunning 19th century market towns. So rather than letting them dilapidate and remain vacant, which large numbers of towns are at the moment, who mentioned the N24 there in the last recent contributions? Senator Cummins. I take the town, and Tipperary town is one example of a town on that route. 30% vacancy. 30%. There's 45,000 vacant houses in the country. And so tackling the housing crisis, we can get families back in to buy and refurbish and support them in using those houses, and then use all the existing infrastructure and have much more attractive public, community public realm. And it's every town. It's Carrick-on-Suir, it's Clonmel, it's Banshee, it's Cahir, it's Tipperary town, and I could keep going right up through the country. We all know the towns across this country that could benefit from that kind of approach. So it's, yes, lots of bypasses is what we should focus on now. But the switch is being made. It's agreed in government. 20% of funding going to active travel and 2-to-1 public transport to roads, because as well as those bypasses, what we need is investment in sustainable active travel and, in my mind, bus and rail. And particularly in our cities, all 5 of our cities, Dublin, Cork, Galway, Waterford, Limerick, metropolitan rail networks for each of those cities, and bus connects for each of those cities, because we need more balanced regional development. Now, we're going to have a difficult choice in that, because it's going to cost a lot of money. The cost of construction, we all know, is just going up. Senator Quigley, we were only talking about that outside in terms of the cost of construction going up. So we're going to have to make difficult choices. I hear the case for stations of Cabra. I absolutely fully understand that. I hear and absolutely understand in Limerick the possibility of using those 4 existing rail lines. It's not that we need to build a new light rail for Limerick. We have a rail infrastructure in Limerick. What we need to do is put electric trains onto those lines, commuter, metropolitan electric, battery electric trains that can stop and start with the same speed as the Luas, but run on the old heavy rail lines. That's where I think we'll go, particularly in the likes of Cork and Limerick. And that's much easier on planning because we've got the existing lines. It's much easier on cost because building new rail lines is really expensive. And in many cases, take the likes of Oireachtas, it's relatively cheap to put in the station, the line's there, but then the way it works is you build around the station. So the development plans at this moment in time, they're all going to city or county councils across the country are doing the development plans. Well, if we're going to do that, and if we're serious about it, and to make the case for investing, let's just, for example, Limerick versus wherever, Cork, Dublin, you could pick any other town or city, then Limerick City Council has to make a decision. Are they going to support this sustainable transport future and steer their development plans around these stations? And I can think of 8-10 stations in Limerick where we could do this on existing lines, or are they not? And if they're not, well, okay, Cork will do it, or Dublin certainly is raring to go to do it, in my mind, or ready and able to do it. So a lot of this is going to be working with local government, and what's important in the bill is the need for local government. This has to be bottom up, has to be centre of local government plans, is that they have a central role in saying, okay, yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to do town centre first. We're going to reuse existing buildings. We're going to build up hubs in those buildings. And we're going to build around our rail, our public transport infrastructure and make this 15-minute city and 15-minute town And a lot of places are already starting to doing it, and they're seeing that's where the jobs are going, that's where the young families are going, so that's what we should do. It's not a negative. On energy, the Taoiseach has said on numerous occasions, I think he's correct, this government has 3 key pieces of legislation, 3 absolute priorities in our legislative programme. The Climate Bill, the Land Development Agency Bill, which complements what I've just been saying there on transport, and the Maritime Area Planning Bill. And the Maritime Area Planning Bill is critical because it will help regulate the development of the offshore industry that has potential to power our future as a country. It's the ardent crush investment of our time to the power of 10 plus. Now, to get it right, we need to get the planning right. Senator Boyne, you'd be very familiar, very experienced in this whole planning area. You know how we can completely tie ourselves in glue if we don't get the planning right. In our own city and Southside Dublin, this is going to be a very contentious issue as wind farms come into Dublin Bay and all along the East Coast. So we have to absolutely make sure that the environmental standards are absolutely proper and correct if we're going to get public support. Because the advantage we have in that is offshore wind is the cheaper fuel now. I mean, I absolutely agree we should look at nuclear. Senator, I wouldn't rule out anything because the climate crisis is so severe. We have to look at every option. But in truth, I don't see the modular small-scale nuclear developing in anything like the way that solar and wind is developing and the costs coming down. And it's never going to be competitive now, nuclear versus renewables in our country, because we've such a wind resource. And at scale, our sea areas are 10 times our land area. This is a huge energy store we have. And it makes sense for us to tap into it, to use it for our own needs, to export it, to convert it to hydrogen and ammonia, to run other systems and to bring industry here and jobs here. But it won't work if we don't get planning right and don't get the public consultation and the public engagement in this right and get the environmental aspect of that planning right. Lastly, Senator Gavin and maybe a number of others mentioned the whole issue about data centres. Just to take that as an example, just to make the point, agriculture is going to have to change, transport has to change, energy has to change, industry has to change. I don't see it impossible for us to go to those data centre companies, they're large multinational companies by and large, who know that their customers around the world will insist that they're zero carbon by the end of this decade. So I think we should go to those companies and say, we want to work with you. We do want data centres here. And we want them here for a whole range of different reasons. One of them is we also have to pay for everything. I mean, I think this NDP, when we produce it in the next few months, is going to have to balance all the investment requirements we have, and they're massive in water infrastructure, in transport infrastructure, in housing. We all know, we're all agreed, we have to spend billions on housing. We also need to spend billions on public transport and on water and in agriculture. And I could keep going on. And I think every party here, we have to have an honest discussion. If we're going to have a real debate, is where's the money coming from? How are we going to pay for it all? And that's a real question. And yes, we can borrow, but at some point the borrowing has to be backed up with income. And we are a successful country. We're successful at foreign direct investment. We're successful in digital industries. So those data centres are part of that industry. Now, we can't have it, though, data centres which are burning gas, which is making it impossible to meet our climate targets. What this bill is saying to every sector, you will have to change your ways so that you fit in within this zero carbon strategy we're going on. So I'll be sitting down with the data centre companies and saying, could we use Ireland as a test location where we'll do backup hydrogen or backup ammonia or backup whatever zero, backup batteries, backup balancing, backup district heating, so that that data centre is part of the solution, not part of the problem. And I don't think that's impossible. I think it actually, going to the companies, while they mightn't like it because it's a hassle or because they have to change their ways, but just like I'm saying, Irish farming is going to have to change its ways. But I think they'll understand that we actually have reasonable logic on our side when we're asking for this and setting out this challenge. And in learning by doing, going to Science Foundation in Ireland, set this as one of our challenges, the same way that Bandon Farm is an example of, that going zero carbon farm. Well, let's do zero carbon data centres. And the benefit of that is it keeps the industry here, and from that, with new corporate tax rules and so on in the world, we have an income to pay for the water services, to pay for the public transport, to pay for the housing. We have to pay for it, and I think we can. Lastly, I'm in danger of using up all that time I said I wouldn't use. I'll only speak for another couple of minutes. Apologies. Just a couple of the broader points. Senator Buttimer made the point about quangos and concern about quangos, and I very much understand his point. We need to retain, we live in a democratic constitutional republic. It's the Oireachtas which should decide. But I think this complicated structure we're setting up in the bill is a correct one, because it's difficult for us, we should be honest, to sometimes think 15, 20, 30 years out. And the likes of the Climate Change Advisory Council can, and we'll bring in the real expertise to do so, and just to guide us, to frame our debate. And we do need that independent, far-sighted council with expertise to be able to present us with the options. So I hear his concerns, but I don't share them in this case. I heard as well Deputy Mullen, or Senator Mullen, Ronan, making the point, which you hear a lot of people and you listen to with respect, well, why should we do it when China is not doing it? Now, in the next breath, he rightly refers to a document that, in my mind, was truly inspirational. It informs a lot of what I think on the whole climate side. Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si. And I think there's something in that, a key to, or within that, and there's loads of other people, it can be secular view, it's not just a spiritual view, but a sense, go back to what I said at the very start about every place matters, every person matters. It's the understanding of the sense of nature here, the sense of the importance of place here, in all our places, which inspires us to do this. It's the beauty of the natural world and of creation around us requires us to protect it, regardless of what China is doing. And actually, it starts here at home. It's in protecting our own environment, our own farm, our own park, our own river. It's something that actually enriches us as we protect our own home here. And I mean, there's a second wider economic reason, because in reality, this is where the new economy is going. And if we kind of said we'll hold off because others aren't doing it, we would miss out on the new economic opportunities that will come from those who do it. But it's more than that. It is, I think, almost that sense of connection to place. And I think coming out of COVID, and community in place, connection to each other, man and nature combined, woman and nature combined, we're not separate. So it's that almost spiritual sense of connection to place, in my mind, and the natural world is what should inspire us to do that. On that, I absolutely agree with Ronan, and I think that argument overcomes his earlier concern, why should we not do it when someone else isn't doing it? Lastly, and I would turn to one of my party colleagues, I hope that's not a problem to finish on, but what Pippa Hackett says about Mother Nature, that she will restore, that she will return, she will nurture us as we come back, and I think that's absolutely true. All the evidence we've seen in the destruction of the natural world that has taken place in the last 50 years is that if we give it any space, her to come back, she comes back very strong in that nurturing way. And that's what we need to do. We need to work with Mother Nature to allow her restore our natural world, which is restoring and protecting us. Thank you.